Many thanks. So I'm very happy to be there with you. I want to thank the organizer for this invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be there. I want to mention that I have an ankle sprain, so I probably very quickly sit down. So sorry about that. So I'm Christina Fernandez-Maloigne. I'm professor at the University of Poitiers, and I'm at the head of a laboratory dealing with computational medical imaging. So it's my pleasure to present you some aspect of these works. To begin, what is computational medical imaging? It's also what we can call radiomics. Finally, it's a recent discipline. It's a method for giving quantitative description of medical imaging that's allowed to deal with a large quantity of data. And finally, that enable to study more in depth as well the pathologies and as well the effect of therapy. Here you have the traditional workflow of radiomics that begin, of course, with examination. So that depends of the kind of system for the acquisition of the images and signal. Then you have an analysis with extraction of characteristic of shape, of intensity, etc. And then you have a mathematical modelization of the patient, finally, of his pathology to help the physician in his diagnostic and his follow-up of the patient. The ultimate goal for radiomics is finally to identify imaging biomarkers to better understand the pathology, and it's the concept finally of virtual biopsy. That is something non-invasive to help in better discover a disease, tumoral disease, degenerative disease, and then that could be iterative. That is to say, you can reproduce as soon as the necessary. And if we make a parallel between virtual biopsy and real biopsy, we can say that biopsy, real biopsy, is finally the reference method that consists in removing a piece of tissue for analyze. Then you can examine pathological cells, and you can define how the cells react in front of a treatment. But we have some disadvantages for this reference method. The fact that finally it's just a local subsampling, and we can wait a global investigation of the organ. Another problem is that give you just the evolution, the state at a precise time, and you cannot reproduce it numerous times because it's something very painful. And essentially for brain biopsy, for example, you have a lot of disadvantages on the fact that you can have hemorrhage, you can have infectious problem, and that can bring to death, finally. So the idea is to avoid brain biopsy as soon as possible, to make virtual biopsy. And of course, imaging can allow that. Here you have an example of optical coherence tomography for retina, for the analysis of retina, which is something very delicate, finally. So here you have the CHEM for real biopsy, and here you have the CHEM for virtual biopsy with different steps. The acquisition of the images, then the analysis of the content of the image, and then the analysis of the global organ, finally. And this concept of virtual biopsy is also the context of digital twin. What is digital twin? Digital twin, finally, is the like a real twin, a copy of the human that begins by the digital copy of the organ, but you can fully finally define a digital twin of a patient, as well as you can modelize the acquisition system, and finally the global behavior of the hospital, and that allows to simulate for example, therapy, to simulate surgery, and then to help the practitioners in the choice of a therapy. So computational medical imaging can bring to digital twin to help as well for the training of the surgeons, for example. So after this quick introduction, I will present you my lab, which is really a privileged structure for computational medical imaging. Then I will focus on a specific modality of acquisition, the ultra-high field MRI scanner. Then we will speak about radiomics and the revolution with artificial intelligence. And then I give you some applications in cerebral imaging for brain tumors, Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis. And then we will conclude on the perspective for radiomics and artificial intelligence. So to begin, I3M laboratory. I3M is for multi-core, multi-organ metabolic imaging. It's a common laboratory between the CNRS, Siemens company, the hospital, and the University of Poitiers since February 2019. And in fact, our main topic is virtual biopsy, so this non-invasive in vivo medical examination that I will present you before. We try to study the cell metabolism as well in normal and in pathological processes. And the main organ we study is brain. So we study brain tumors, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, some psychiatric disease also, and also neurocardiovascular disease like strokes. We take into account not only imaging, but also contextual data, like genetic data, data of life, data of environment, physiological elements. And we try finally to construct this digital twin in health. Our tools are mathematical modeling. In our lab, we have some laboratory of mathematics. Of course, we have researchers in signal and image processing, also data scientists, and we also have some application dealing with 3D reconstruction and visualization for the help in diagnosis, for example. Of course, when you speak about computational medical imaging, you need equipment, and so we have at your disposal a platform that I will detail just after. Nowadays, we are around 10 permanent computer scientists, 6 mathematicians, and 7 staff from the hospital. We have currently 8 PhD students, by the past 9 have defended, 2 postdocs, and of course, we try to publish. The initial budget of the laboratory was 1.5 million given by Siemens to organize its research and development. And then we have applied for a regional, national, and international project. And nowadays we have a total budget of 4.7 million euros, so that helps us to have a lot of PhD students and research engineers working with us. So here you have the radiology platform. We have 4 scanners, 1 digital mammography, 6 radiodiagnostic rooms. I test one of them very, very quickly for my uncle last week. All is perfect. We have also ultrasound scanners. We have a PET scan and 4 MRI. It's a radiologist which is at the head of the laboratory with me, who also is at the head of the radiology platform at the Hospital of Poitiers. And so I give a particular attention to the MRI platforms because we have 1.5 Tesla MRI that is very usual in all the hospitals in France. But we have also close to, for the month 1, 3 Tesla, and very quickly a second one. And we have also 7 Tesla MRI. And I will detail this MRI because this ultra-high field MRI allow us to have a very high resolution, as well anatomical imaging, but also a functional and molecular imaging to study finally the cells and to analyze the behavior of organs. In the world, we have very few, finally, 7 Tesla MRI working as well in research and for clinical use. Here you have some elements from 2022. Probably nowadays we have someone more. In Europe, we have for the moment probably something like 40 7 Tesla MRI. And in France, for the moment, we are only 3. One in Marseille, Hôpital La Timone, another one in Saclay, the CEA, and probably you have heard about a new MRI in Saclay, 11.7 Tesla MRI, that have given the very recently first images of a human brain. But in fact, the colleagues from Saclay came to Poitiers to have a test about the sequences to do with human, because the first sequence they do, it was with a potimarron. And this year they have some tests with human volunteers, and they come to Poitiers to test their sequences, because in Poitiers we have the only 7 Tesla MRI with clinical use. And in the world, we have the more numerous real patient coming for 7 Tesla MRI. It's nowadays more than 5,000 patients. That is to say that people with stroke, with Alzheimer, with brain tumor suspicion, etc., are coming at the hospitals, addressed by neurologists, by urgentists, to have an MRI at 7 Tesla. And so we spend a lot of times in 2020 to test our antenna, to test our sequences of acquisition. During the COVID, finally we were at the hospital. that was finally not so bad time for us, because we were testing the sequences that we can apply at the end of 2020 on real patients. So why it is really interesting to have an ultra-high field MRI? It's because it's a multimodalities system. Of course, you have anatomical MRI, the well-known acquisition, but that give you really fine brain architecture around 0.2 millimeters. You have also diffusion modality that can give you some imaging finally of the connection under the brain. You have also functional MRI with perfusion acquisition that can allow to study subcortical brain activity. And you have also something very specific that is named spectroscopy. I will detail just after. And this spectroscopy really gives you the biochemical behavior of the cells in the brain. For the moment, we have only antenna in 7 Tesla MRI for brain and for articular problems, that is to say for ankle, for knees. And very quickly, we will have antenna for kidney, for heart. But for the moment, 7 Tesla is dedicated essentially to brain. So I show you some imaging for anatomical sequences. Here you have the 3 modalities that you can obtain with MRI: T1, T1 contrast enhanced, and T2 flare. Here you have some images of tumor. The difference between T1 and T2 imaging are there. In fact, for T1, you can see that the hypo signal is given for finally water, and at the opposite, in T2, the water is on hyper intensity. So here you have different T1 weighted images with the three plans, sagittal, coronal, and axial. And T1 is really dedicated to have shape metrics, shape characteristic, like cortical surface, like cortical volume or thickness. And at the opposite, if you look at a T2 image, you can see that you have a good image of water. So for example, here you have kidneys, and so you can see water in the renal tubules. That is normal, but you can also see stagnant blood. And on this slide, you can see the difference between 1.5 Tesla, 3 Tesla, and 7 Tesla MRI. And you can appreciate the resolution of the image. Of course, you have really the details of the structures. And here is the difference between 3T, 7 Tesla, and 11.7. And so you can see that we have more and more contrast and detail. Then regarding diffusion MRI, that gives you some functional information. It's more and more used in pre-surgery to analyze the connection between the different parts of the brain. You have the three modality A, D, C, F, A, and trace image. I don't detail because we are not in a session about a medical aspect of human, but just imaging. But you can see tractography, which is very nice imaging with fibers with different colors, and that is very helpful, for example, when a surgeon has to extract a tumor, to analyze where is the tumor regarding the different fibers of the brain, to avoid to destruct some important part of these fibers. One more time, the difference between 3 Tesla and 7 Tesla for diffusion imaging. And you have, of course, more information, as you can see with this imaging. You have more information regarding the diffusion, regarding the fibers between the different parts of the brain. Functional imaging is also possible with perfusion MRI, with these three type of imaging. You have hypo and hyperfused area, blood flow that are given in the CBV, CBF, MTT, and TTP imaging. In fact, in this case, you have a look on the microcirculation of the tissue, and to analyze the perfusions of an organ, you can use what we call an endogenous marker, and then the marker is just hydrogen, finally, the water you have in your body. But you can also use an heterogeneous, an exogenous contrast medium, and generally this contrast medium is bolus of gadolinium. So in this case, you have an invasive act because you have gadolinium in your blood, but it's not at all radioactive, so it's less invasive than TEP imaging, for example. With this kind of imaging of perfusion, you can reconstruct angiography, the equivalent of angiography, and one more time you have here different representation of 3 Tesla and 7 Tesla angiograms with different correction regarding the motion, and with a full correction of the motion, you have a very good imaging on the back of this slide. Then the last modality for MRI is spectroscopy. The principle of MRI, in fact, is to analyze the signal from water molecules, and with spectroscopy, the opposite. You suppress the water signal and you analyze signal of other molecules. It's very easy because it's the same device, the same examination than the other modalities in MRI, but you really have the analysis of the metabolism of the organs. So here is a principle for general modalities in MRI. You have a collection from water molecules, and here is the principle in magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Here the abscisse correspond to what we call pairs per million, and the ordinates represent the signal intensity. And then we analyze finally the shifting of this of different molecules that we call metabolites that regulate the behavior of an organ of the brain here. And we obtain signal like this one with very well-known metabolite. And this metabolite have a typical peak at different moments of the day, regarding also your gender, regarding your age, and they have different significance. For example, NAA is very prominent when you are very active. So normally, when you are hearing for me, you are perfectly concentrate, and so you have a peak of NAA just in the moment. We can also rebuild imaging. So normally you have just a signal at a voxel point, and that takes something like 15 minutes to acquire this signal for a voxel. Of course, if we want a map, then you need more times. So the patient has to stay more longer in the MRI. But you can obtain mapping of different metabolites. Here you have the different metabolites with, of course, when it's black, no signal, and when it's white, you have a high value of the signal. So in fact, you can superpose the different modalities. For example, here we have a T1 weighted image. We have here the map for glutamate. And then you can analyze the concentration of glutamate in different parts of your brain. I just show you the most studied metabolites. So as I said before, NAA, that is N-acetylaspartate acid, is really an important brain metabolite. The levels give an indication of the good behavior of the brain. In fact, if you have not enough NAA, that's a marker of neurodegenerative disease, for example. Glutamate is the most abundant neurotransmitter in the anterior brain. Glutamate has a key role for transmission between the neurons. What we call JLX is in fact a mix between glutamate and glutamine, another metabolite. And the concentration on glutamate show, for example, problem like hypoxia. So if you have a stroke, a baby, for example, who born with different problems can have a high taux of glutamate. So it's a vital marker for hypoxia, for stroke. Then you have also choline. Choline is also an indicator of membrane turnover. So it's a bad marker, for example, for a tumor. If we look at a tumor in the brain with anatomical imaging, and then if you analyze the choline at the voxel corresponding to the tumor, if the choline is high, that's a marker of malignity. But choline is also a marker of inflammatory disease like multiple sclerosis. And another metabolite is creatine. Creatine is generally used as a ratio. We speak about ratio between choline and creatine, between MIO and creatine. And regarding MIO, it's criteria for dementia diagnosis. If you have a high rate of MIO, it's a marker of Alzheimer or other dementia pathologies. So in fact, there are some tables that are reference for the different peak. And so I cannot give you the absolute value. My colleagues, which are neuroradiologists, well know all this. In fact, when you are not usual with it, you have tables regarding the sex, regarding the age, period of the age, period of the day, and you have to finally compare the value of your metabolites, of the different peaks, with the usual value. And so you can say, for example, I'll show you some example later, where we can see that NAA is very high, so that's okay. And in other case, you have an increasing of MIO and a decreasing of NAA, and that corresponds, for example, to a marker of Alzheimer. So it's a combination of the value of these different metabolites that can give you informations associated with, of course, anatomical imaging and functional imaging. I will answer to your question? Okay. So here you have, for example, some imaging. On the top of the slide, you have a normal brain. And you can see that you have lactate, for example, which is, I don't speak about lactate, but lactate is also another indication for well behavior of the brain or other organs, of kidney, for example. So here you can see at the right of the signal, you can see a peak of lactate that corresponds to a normal behavior. And here you have tumor. And if I take the metabolites of choline, NAA, and lactate for this voxel in this part of the brain, that correspond to a tumor, that you can see that NAA is very, very low. We can see that lactate finally disappears, it's just like nose, but you haven't picked like this. And unfortunately, as the choline is very high, is not a benign tumor, but a malign tumor.
What is the spatial resolution when you do spectroscopy? You show a voxel,
yeah.
But how you define a voxel big enough to have enough precision in your spectrum?
In fact, here we are at 7 Tesla. That is to say that the resolution is 0.2 millimeter. So that's the basis element. When we want to make a map, we can have not so precise resolution to be faster for the acquisition. Because the problem is that the more precise you are, the more longer the patient or the normal people who make a simulation has to stay in the machine. And of course, you don't have to be a claustrophobe. I don't know what is the name in English, because the powerful is the MRI, the smaller is the tunnel. So for me, it's okay for me to put my ankle, my knees, but to stay 2 hours in the machine with my brain fully in the tunnel, with a lot of noise, it's something very, very anxious.
I understand the spatial resolution.
Yeah.
Image,
Yeah.
But when you do spectroscopy,
Yeah.
usually you do this at a pixel which is much bigger than the spatial resolution because you need to average a little bit.
Yeah.
And what is the compromise?
The compromise, in fact, is really in correlation with the time to spend in the machine. So I cannot really answer that. That depends. But of course, the best resolution you want, the most longer you have to stay in the machine. And here I show you just an image of the signal at a time t, of course. But you can have also evolution. If you stay more longer in the machine, then we can have evolution of the signals. And sometimes what we do is to make acquisition during the morning, then after the lunch, and there at the end of the day, because of course we cannot stay all the day in the machine, but we have make some tests with volunteers that comes in the morning, that come back after the lunch, and then that come just before the dinner to analyze the evolution of the metabolites during the day. So finally, you can well see that we have a lot of signal and imaging. Here you have the different modalities that you can obtain with the same machine. So of course you can stay 1 hour and a half and even 2 hours in the machine, but at the end you obtain this kind of imaging of your organ. So I don't go to resume all the information you can have with different modality. But we can just say that MRI, it's a green imaging. Of course, you can have radiotracer like gadolinium, but in fact, in the majority of cases, we have endogenous markers, so it's totally green imaging. It's something so non-invasive, and that gives you as well information on an anatomical plan, but also functional and even metabolic. Functional information is the global behavior of the plant, of the brain, the correlation between the different parts of your brain. When you have a cognitive task, for example, but you have also metabolic informations, and metabolic informations are really informations of the behavior of the cells. So it's really, really interesting. That allows to have better understanding of the function of an organ. Yeah.
Just a quick, how is it possible to stay at the same position for 2 hours? I mean, if you have a resolution of 0.2 millimeters, you cannot
In fact, the acquisition, we have some pause between the acquisitions, but we also do some exercise with the patient before the acquisitions to help him to be more relaxed. For children, for example, for the moment, we generally we can need to for small children we can need to make anesthesia for them, small anesthesia to stay them more relaxed. But of course, you make the acquisition not in the same time. So you have to say to the patient, please don't move, and then he can move, and then you make another acquisition, etc., etc. But of course, the problem of noise is something very important, and that is to say that you need pre-treatment before the full analysis, before the extraction of characteristic. And in MRI, pre-processing is really important. That is to say that the more well-known process is to finally to have an average of different imaging at different times, and so you eliminate the Gaussian noise. But of course, before really make an automatical analysis, generally you have pre-processing of the data to remove the noise. Due to motion of the patient, due to something like that. But of course, if you stay 1 hour and a half in the machine, you can move during 1 hour and a half. You haven't to stay in apnea during 1 hour and a half. but you're right, the noise motion is a problem. And finally, it's a perfect transition with this slide. We have repeated just before. The fact is ultra high field MRI is very sensitive to artifact. For example, when we make the regulation of the sequences, we spend a lot of times with a specific noise that we cannot suppress, and we realize that there was a loose screw on the antenna of the brain. And so we spend a lot of time to try to pre-process the imaging, to try to have regulations of the sequences. And at the end, it was just a problem with a screw. And when we adapt the screw, no noise. So of course, you need to optimize acquisitions method. We need denoising techniques. And it's why the colleagues from Saclay come to Poitiers, where we have already experiments with real patients to regulate finally their sequences at 11.7 Tesla. We also see that we have a lot of information that's very helpful for the diagnosis and the follow-up of the patient, but in another way, it's also something very problematic. because generally an expert cannot see all the information in 1 seconds, and it's why we need data mining and machine learning method. So we can move now to the aspect of artificial intelligence. When we speak about computational medical imaging, finally, it's a change of paradigm regarding medical imaging. That is to say, you move from visual information that we have at the beginning of the 19th century to measurable information. It's very important to have reproducible measurement to really help the specialist in this diagnosis and this follow-up of a patient. And finally, when we speak of computer medical imaging or radiomics, we have this kind of application. That is to say, you have an image, then you extract informations like shape, intensity, texture, and then you need machine learning and even 3D rendering to analyze the data, and that corresponds finally to the real biopsy I saw you at the beginning of my speech. Conventional biopsy that brings to an analysis and then information about a patient or a pathology of a patient. But in fact, even if you have already a lot of information in MRI, for example, to have a real good diagnosis and a really follow-up of a patient, of a pathology, you need other information than radiomics. You need what we call the omics, that is to say genomics, for example. That's what I show you there. Here you have the radiomics, but also pathomics, metabolomics, proteomics, etc., genomics. So the virtual, the digital twin is made not only with imaging information, but with all this information. And it's why we need artificial intelligence. In fact, we try to win the 4V courses for 5P medicine, as we said usually. So what is 4V courses? It's the fact that you have a lot of information with a huge volume of informations, especially with MRI. So the first V is a V of volume, but you have also velocity, because there are high speed of accumulation of all this data. It's very easy, finally, nowadays, to have an MRI, to have an echograph, to have blood analysis, so V of velocity. You have also the V of variety, because you have different sources, and these sources are different, so you have heterogeneous data, and you cannot have the same trust in the different data. So it's the V of veracity. So you have to deal with this 4V to obtain what we call 5P medicine. 5P medicine is a personalized, predictive, participatory, medicine of precision, preventive medicine, and we can also add finally a 6P, which is a P of proof. And to deal with all this information, of course, you need artificial intelligence, that is to say machine learning, and more deep learning. So, just some remember, because I suppose that you already know that, about machine learning. So mainly you have two kinds of machine learning, supervised and unsupervised. Of course, you have also semi-supervised, you have also other kind of learning, but the two main family are supervised and unsupervised. In the case of supervised learning, you need an expert, you need a supervisor, then you collect informations, you give the expert or the experts, and it's better to have different experts give labels. And then, after the training part, you have a model to predict what could be a new data. And then, if you give a new image, a new data, you will have the prediction of the label, of the class of this new data. For unsupervised learning, you need also some collection of data as an input of your model, but finally the prediction will be which data are similar and which data are different. So we obtain this kind of classification with clustering for unsupervised learning, with the difference process that you probably know, K-mean clustering, the most well-known algorithm, where data is divided into a specific number of group of clusters, and then we have the minimization of the total square distances between the data points and the centers of each cluster. You have also hierarchical clustering. You have also what we call density-based spatial clustering of application with noise. So here are the three main algorithms for clustering. I don't mention there another technique for unsupervised learning, which is dimensionality reduction. And you have also associations. For association rule, you finally you try to discover relationship or a common pattern in different data. It's essentially used for market basket analysis, for example. So it's not really usual for imaging in general and medical imaging in particular. So that's for unsupervised learning. And for supervised learning, you have all the well-known methodology of classifications, where you have a binary result. A data is in one class or in another one. And then the regression, where you can give a probability, finally, to be in a class or in another one. For clustering, for regression or for classification, you can use neural network, and it's why I now focus on artificial neural network. So what are artificial neural network? They are inspired by the biological neurons. As you can see there, on biological neuron, you have information, you have input on the dendrite. Then you have an accumulation of the information in the cell body. And after a certain threshold, then the information is passing through the axon to other neurons. So finally, if you look at the first artificial neural networks, the neurons of McCulloch and Pitt, you have exactly the same principle with inputs, a body that sums the information, and then a result after a threshold of the sum of the information. And of course, if you accumulate different layer of neurons, you have a perceptron like this one, which is very similar to biological neural networks. The story of neural networks is not so recent, because, as I said, we began with McCulloch and Pitt during the 1940. Then we have different evolutions with the perceptron in the 1980, and then we arrived in 2010 with what we call now deep learning, deep neural network, convolutional neural network, that are a particular form of neural network with different layer and more important number of neurons, finally. This is allowed by the capacity of graphic processing units. And the first convolutional neural network was created in 1912 by Alex Krzyzewski, Alexander Krzyzewski, who was in a team at the University of Toronto, the team of Geoffrey Hinton. And Alexander created this network by using graphic processing units for a competition, which name is ImageNet. And that finally, that was the revolution of neural network at this period. And then we pass from this scheme, where you have to extract informations to have features as input of a neural network, to this scheme, where you have a level of abstraction that allow you to finally have a full scheme with the extraction of the informations that are included finally in the neural network. And that's the same for radiomics. For radiomics, at the beginning, you have to extract different features. And nowadays, with deep learning, you have an automatic feature extraction and then the modelization of the different elements in an image to define, for example, the classification between tumoral part or not tumoral part. We can have a quick look on the convolutional neural network global scheme. So you have the first part, which is the convolutional section, and then the second part, which is the classical classification section. So the role of the first layer is the convolution layer is to analyze input images and to detect the presence of a set of features. And so the output of this convolution layer is a set of feature maps. Then after the convolution, you can have the pooling step that consists of reducing the dimension of the image. The goal of this step is to keep the much relevant informations, but by reducing the dimensions. And the most used pooling functions are max pooling, but you have also the average pooling. Regarding the convolution, after the different convolution layer and pooling layer that you can iterate, you have a flattened layer with all the characteristic of the image that have been extracted during the convolutional sections. And this flattened layer is the entry of a fully connected layers, a classical artificial neural network. So the convolution layer produce features map. The output of the pooling layer is the same number of the feature maps as input, but with a compression of the informations. And the convolution and the pooling steps are iterate as many times as necessary, as I just said, until of the different characteristics of the images can be classified. For example, the noise, the eyes of the small cats. And I don't speak about the activation layer, which is done just after the convolution step. Generally, this activation layer is made by ReLU functions, rectified linear units function. This function replaces all negative value received as input with zeros. And this activation layer can allow to make the model non-linear and therefore to give more complexity and to allow this level of abstraction you need to extract the good informations. And the fully connected layer is the application of classical neural network. And so you finally, the question is just the number of layers and the number of neurons you have in each layer. So different scheme to show that you have these two steps, the convolution part, then the classification part, and in the middle you have the vectors of characteristic. And I just want to mention that you can iterate as many number you need to obtain a good characterization of the image. So knowing that, we can move to different tools for computational medical imaging. Of course, as for any classification system, you need some metrics to evaluate your systems. Classically, we use true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative. But of course, when you are in medical applications, you need to avoid false negative. You need to avoid this bad detection that can be very dangerous, because if you forget a pathology, that could be dramatic for the patient. So we have a particular attention in medical application for false negative rate. With this different rate, you have the classical accuracy, sensitivity, specificity. You can build, of course, a confusion matrix. So here is a visualization of a confusion matrix with the predicted label regarding the real labels of your data. And something very helpful is also the ROC curve. And of course, if you have the linear result, that means that you have a very bad classification scheme. And if you go through the horizontal result, you have the best classification. We have also other metrics like recall, which is finally sensitivity, the F1 score, which is a weighted ratio between precision and recall, and the precision recall curve to put in finally in comparison with the previous one. What we generally analyze is the area under the ROC curve. We say that is between 0, bad result, and 1, best result. So after this matrix, I just want to mention a very well-known image database for computer vision in general, not specifically for medical imaging, ImageNet. This database was an initial idea for Chinese researchers. And then since 2014, we have really a huge database of over 14 million of images that have been labelized from web by humans. And there's a competitions, ImageNet, who is organized each year, and the first CNN was created during the competition in 2012, as I said before, and it's the period where Geoffrey Hinton, Alex Krzyzewski, and their team from the University of Toronto created the first CNN for these competitions. Here you have different images from the ImageNet challenge, and the majority of the neural network are trained on this image. Finally, to have a comparison between different architectures. And for example, here you have the result of the most used deep learning models with their result on ImageNet challenge. So you have AlexNet, VGGNet, Inception, and ResNet. And here you have the result of accuracy and the comparison with the number of parameters, so the side of the networks. I don't details each architecture, but here you have the different possibility for the main used network. And I just mentioned a specific network because it's really helpful in biomedical segmentation, SegNet. SegNet is a semantic segmentation model. Its architecture consists in an encoder network and a corresponding decoder network. The architecture of the encoder network is topologically identical to the 13 convolution layers in the VGG network. So it's something inspired from VGG 16 network. The role of the decoder network is to map the low resolution encoder feature maps to full input resolution feature maps for pixel-wise classification. And the novelty of SegNet regarding VGGNet lies in its manner in which the decoder unsampled its lower resolution input feature maps. And specifically, the decoder uses pooling indices computed in the max pooling step of the corresponding encoder to perform nonlinear unsampling. Another used deep learning model in biomedical imaging is UNet. UNet is a fully convolutional neural network model, initially developed by Rosenberger, as mentioned there, Philip Fischer and Thomas Brook, for a competition in MICAI 2015. MICAI is the most famous conference for medical and signal and image processing. And then the left side is called the contraction path, consisting of the general convolutional process with many contraction blocks. Each block takes an input applies to 3x3 convolutional layers, followed by a ReLU function, as I mentioned before. And then you have a 2x2 max pooling. And the number of filter of feature mappings after each block doubles, and so the architecture can learn complex structure efficiently. And the right-hand side is an expansive path, which is made up of transposed 2D convolutional layers. And the number of expansion block is exactly the same as the number of contraction block. And then UNet is able to localize the image by predicting the image pixel by pixel. So SegNet and UNet are the most used deep learning models in biomedical imaging. And they are used for different challenges. Some challenges are organized in the frame of MICAI, like BRATS. BRATS is a challenge for brain tumor segmentation. And we have another challenge for aneurysm detection, which name is ADAM. And there's another ADAM challenge, but not in the frame of MICAI, but for molecular age-related macular degeneration. And so we have two add-on challenge, one for brain, for stroke in brain, and another one for retina. Generally, the different architecture we use for computational medical imaging are made by transfer learning that help us to finally use well-known architecture like UNet, like SegNet, and then to use the knowledge acquired by a neural network to solve another problem more or less similar. So transfer learning is based on the hypothesis that the features of the lower layers are simple, are generic, and the features of the upper layers are complex, are specific to the problem. So generally, we keep the lower layers and we adapt the upper layers. There are different strategies. The first strategy is what we call total fine-tuning. Then, in this case, the last fully connected layer of the pre-trained network is replaced by another classifiers, adapt to the new problem. And this strategy is used when the new collection of images is large, when you have a big amount of images. Another strategy is the features extraction. So this strategy is used when the new image collection, the new application is dealing with a small amount of data, but data very similar of the pre-trained images, so very similar to the applications that has conducted to the first neural network. So in this case, you use the features of the pre-trained network, so the convolution part, and we remove the classification part, the last fully connected layer, by fixing all the other parameters. And there is a third strategy, which is a partial fine-tuning, when you replace the last fully connected layer, and you also replace some parameters of the other layer. And in fact, you have to see that strategy one consists in training the whole network, is not feasible when you have a new collection with small quantity of images, because you have a risk of overfitting. But you cannot use the strategy 2 when the new images are very different of the original images, and is why you need this partial fine-tuning to adapt between strategy 1 and strategy 2. And finally, if you have a look of the number of papers in the field of medical imaging using artificial intelligence, you can see that you have a huge amount of papers during the 1919, at the beginning of the perceptron. And my PhD was finally about the use of neural networks in texture image analysis. Then we forget neural network during some decades, and since 2010s, we have one more time a lot of application dealing with artificial intelligence. So I can show you this scheme where you have some period of frozen of neural network, and you can see that since the 2010s, we have a renew of neural networks. And nowadays, of course, we have ChatGPT. That is something very specific. Regarding radiomics, radiomics follows the same chain than neural network at the end, because you can see that during the last 10 decades we have an increase of the amount of paper speaking about radiomics. And here you have the bibliometric analysis of as well artificial intelligence with machine learning and deep learning. So, to conclude this part, we can say that deep learning represents the current state of the art for medical imaging that give better results in the literatures. The great advantage is the fact that we don't need to extract prior informations, but the disadvantage relies on the fact that we need more data to train the neural network. And in medical applications, sometimes you have very few data, because when you have rare pathology, for example, you don't have a lot of informations. Also, that requires more computing power during the training phase, at least, and so that relies on consumption of energy, which is more important, and that could be a problem. We can also see that without analysis, neural networks are black box, and this black box can be analyzed, but we can see that this system does not use the same criteria as humans. And for medical application, that could be a problem, because if you want that expert trust in your system, they need to have some elements to be similar to their own analysis. And these systems are finally very sensitive to imperceptible variations. Our brain can adapt a lot of variations. For example, today I'm with white trousers. If tomorrow you see me with another dress, for example, I suppose that you recognize me, but for an automatical system is not so obvious. So that's also the limit of the algorithm. So after all this information, I can show you some application of radiomics and artificial intelligence for applications in the use of MRI in brain pathologies, diagnosis, and follow-up. So to begin, I show you this study that have not been made in my lab, but it's very interesting study because that present a proof of concept for developing an abnormality detector for brain MRI and in various databases, because here we have more than 9,000 scans collected from different hospitals in 2 different continents, in America and in Asia. And then the trained database is formed with a lot of scan in MRI T2 flares with normal brain and some abnormal brains with, as you can see there, infection, with hemorrhages, with tumors. And so the principle of the system is just to define which MRI T2 flare imaging are corresponding to normal brain and which images correspond to abnormal brain with these varieties of pathologies. The present experiments show really promising results. The IF1 score and the IUC result are up to 18%. So that indicates that such an approach could be used to build a first triage system for brain MRI studies. In fact, you can have a first triage by an artificial intelligence that just say, here it's an abnormal image, and then the physician can have more intention on abnormal images than in the other one. But the paper show also the problem that we have for the homogenization of different cohort of patients, because here you have different equipment, you have different place with different sequences, so different characteristic is really a challenge to solve. But that give you really interesting information to have a more generalized system. And the paper shows also the interest to add other information that imaging, for example, clinical report, for example, other genetic information. And so that really show that to have a really efficient system, you need not only imaging, but also you need metadata on the system. So now I will show you some results we have obtained in my lab, to begin with brain tumors. So I first present you an application for the segmentation of glioma. Glioma are the most common brain tumor, primitive brain tumors, with different degree of aggressiveness. It's an infiltrative tumor, so not so easy to segment, even for the radiologist. You can see the different part on this imaging. Then you have the core in green. You have the enhancing and non-enhancing part in blue and in orange. And you have the edema around the tumor, which can be very difficult to analyze, because as is an infiltrative process, even 2 surgeon or radiologist have not the same segmentation of this part. The different structure of neural network that we can use for this kind of segmentation has been made in the frame of the challenge BRATS. BRATS is an international challenge for brain tumor segmentation. The challenge has begun with only around 20 patients from single institutions, and nowadays we have around 19 institutions which annotate this brain MRI of more than 200 patients with high-grade glioma and low-grade glioma. So here I show you the result we have obtained in my lab. One more time, you can see the different part of the tumor. You have the core, the contrast enhancing, you have the edema. And if we look at the DICE score is a common evaluation metric used in computer vision. You probably know this metrics. It's used to measure the similarity between two sets, finally, so between manual segmentation in this case and automatical segmentation by a CNN. And then we obtain a very good DICE score, close to 90%, and that show that we have a real good predicted regions regarding the ground truth region. But moreover, the interest for after the automatic segmentation is to have a prediction of the grade. So that's something also to take into account for the BRATS challenge. And since 1917, the BRATS challenge asked to give an overall cervical prediction score for patient diagnosis with the primary glioblastoma. In fact, it's really important because there are two main grades from glioma regarding the Wu classifications. These grades correspond to benign grades 1 and 2. And in this case, you can have big tumor, but in fact benign tumor with a very slow progressions. These tumors are already diffuse, but they can be asymptomatic. That means that, I don't want to afraid you, but you can have a glioma without any symptom. In fact, when the first symptoms appears, it's already too late. That means that you are already in grades 3 and 4. Generally, you can observe a glioma at grade 1 just finally because you make an MRI for another reason, because you have a car accident, for example. But it's totally asymptomatic at the beginning. But these grades can evolve in grades 3 and 4, and these cases are malignant one with a very rapid evolution. It's a very aggressive cancers. Of course, you can well see the difference with anatomic imaging, because here you have a necrotic core that you haven't for benign tumors. But when you look at this necrosis part, in fact, it's already too late. So it's really important to differentiate the grade as soon as possible. And for example, this glioma tumor are the main tumor for children. And so it's really important for children, for teenagers, to analyze this kind of tumors, to help to stop them by surgery or by some treatment. And if you take care of this tumor at the beginning, in fact, there's no problem for the future. The children can grow normally without any problem for the future. So here you have first test by analyzing just anatomical MRI, T1 and T2 imaging, with low grade and high grade. And here, for example, you have a different exam at the low level grade, high level grade, and then the intermediate level. We can well see the difference between these different images, but one more time, if you wait to see differences, it's too late. That is to say that anatomical information is not enough to analyze the graduation and to detect glioma at a slow level. It's why we need multimodalities, and for example, we need spectroscopy, as I presented to you before. So in our case, we have used a database from the Hospital of Poitiers with anatomical MRI, diffusion, perfusion, MRI, and also spectroscopy signals on patients at the hospital. We see that we have an unbalanced classes. We have only 45 low-grade glioma and more than 200 high-grade. But in fact, is because it's a silentious pathology. And so it's very difficult to have low-grade glioma, because generally when someone come to the hospital because he has a headache, because he has some trouble in staying, in walking, for example, when he has some problem for hearing, some problem of motion, it's already a high grade. So it's why we have less low grade than high grade. All this pathology have been histologically confirmed. That is to say, we have the biopsy of the tumors to train our system. As usually, we have 33% of the base that is used for the training part, and then we use for the test and for the generalization. So here you have the result. We compare our result to different publications in 2018 and 2019. So you can see the result using CNN, and generally this result give very good rate of accuracy with just anatomical informations. But you can see that when you use multimodality, even with other classification system like support vector machine, we reach a high rate of accuracy. I don't show you the true negative and the false negative, because that's another story. But you can see that CNN give very good result, and multimodality with or without CNN give also very good rate of classification. In our case, we have used a system adapted from ResNet with transfer learning on our database, and then we obtain a very good accuracy rate. Of course, it's not the end of the story. For the moment, we are working on increasing the size of the data set with new patients. We also use different method for few-shot learning, because hopefully we have not so many imaging that we could need. We are working on method of reinforcement learning by incorporating different prior information, genetic informations in particular. And we also are working on the problem of interpretability. It's really important for the surgeons, for the neuroradiologists, to have explicable neural networks, because they need to know if they can trust or not in the systems. And for example, in our case, we have analyzed the different elements that have been involved in the analysis, and we have seen that the imaging of diffusions, ADC, have not been taken into account by our neural network. But if we look at these images, we can see that in low grade and in high grade, you have real differences between the ADC, so between the different diffusion images. So that's a question for the radiologist, because when he makes his diagnosis, he uses the ADC difference. And our system doesn't use these informations. So we have to go further on this. So just to say that nowadays we are working with genetic information to try to predict this. So I have no time to show you multiple sclerosis. I can say that in this case, we are in the case of frugal artificial intelligence, because finally there are very different cases of multiple sclerosis. That is the pathology for young women. And just to say that in our cases, we have used UNET, that we have adapted to our problema. UNET that was be trained in ImageNet, and we have adapted on our images of multiple sclerosis. We have tested different level in our UNET network. We can see that 4 levels give the best result. And we are working nowadays in the evolution, the analysis of the evolution of the pathology with the detection of new lesions with functional MRI. Another very interesting applications about finally Alzheimer. You probably know that Alzheimer disease is shown with alteration of the hippocamp. But one more time, when you see alteration of the hippocamp, it's too late. So the idea is really to have an early graduation of the disease by looking at people with complaints on memory, and to try to predict which one will have an Alzheimer disease in the future and which one just have normal complaints of memory as people with coming older and have just a normal problem in their memory. So here you have finally a normal grade, and here you have the evolutions of the hippocampus, and we try to detect at this grade which develop an Alzheimer or not. And for this, we need also a spectroscopy. I just show you that we have very good result in precision, in recall, in F1 score by labelizing different categories of patient. Here we have normal patient. Here we have, in fact, Alzheimer disease, and you have different grade of complaints in memory. And what we have done, and I just want to show you that, is explainable artificial intelligence by analyzing which kind of metabolites the system used to define the different grade between MCI subject, so people with a complaint in memory, normal healthy subject, and Alzheimer disease subject. So we have a look on the NAA, and we will see that for healthy subject, the NAA present a high peak, so that's normal. That corresponds to the literature. Then we see that other elements that have been used by the system are choline, creatine, and NAA. And we know in the literature that choline is a marker of disease in the memory. And for example, when you give creatine to older people, they have best result in cognitive task. So all the elements we find to be determinant for the CNN, NAA, choline, creatine are fully in connection with the analysis of the specialist. So it's a very promising result. No time to present you another application dealing with stroke. No time to present you what we do for the visualization of the data with CNN. In conclusion, so very quickly, I want to come back on different challenges. So one of the challenges is the strong dependencies of the deep learning algorithm on the configuration of hyperparameters. So there are some works nowadays working on the best configurations. I will leave you my slides so you can have more information in details. Another challenge, of course, is the lack of sufficient labelized training data in neuroimaging, because the neuroradiologists have no time, and because, as I said before, we have sometimes very rare pathology, and so it's difficult to have labelized training data. So transfer learning is a part of the solution, but you have also to develop data augmentation strategy. The GAN are also a solution, but you have to be very careful about the creation of this imaging to be really in correlation with the real imaging, the real pathology. Another challenge is the problem of missing data. And then in this case, there are new methods to finally produce imaging from one modality to another one. And there's also a challenge about fusions of results. And it's why we need finally cooperative deep learning, what we can call federative learning in different places, from different hospitals, for example. And if we look at the radiomics, finally here the perfect gem for radiomics, you have, of course, radiomics coming from imaging, but you have also other informations. Then the transformation, the selections of the more important features as made directly by the neural networks. And then you can have the model of your digital twin that can predict the result of a therapy, of a surgery on your digital twin before trying on the real patients. And just to conclude, there's also a big challenge about interpretability. And one more time, there's a lot of works nowadays about the different interpretability method. So sorry to be so long. I don't realize that I have so much information to give to you. So if you have some questions, I'm at your disposal.